At the general meeting, in front of over 100 pairs of eyes, he announced, Su Yue is stepping down as product director for health reasons. Effective immediately, Bai Ruolin will take over the position. Just as I walked in, my prenatal test report fell to the floor in front of me. He read the line, looked up at me and said, let's get a divorce. Ruolin has 6 months left and I need to be with her. I didn't cry. I picked up the paper, folded it, put it in my pocket and walked out of the meeting room. That day was Wednesday. I took a half day off to go to the hospital and pick up my prenatal report. I was 6 weeks pregnant, and all the values were normal. I sat in the car and read the paper 3 times, my finger tracing the small number in the progesterone column. I couldn't quite put my feelings into words. There was nervousness but also a hint of bitterness. Over the past 6 months I had been juggling 4 projects in the product department, coming home at 2 or 3 in the morning almost. Every day I had 3 bouts of stomach trouble but didn't dare take time off. Yet at a time like this, fate had given me a child. I wanted to surprise him, so I didn't call. Instead, I drove straight back to the office. After parking, I got into the elevator and pressed the button for the 16th floor, my mind still racing over how to bring it up. The mirrored elevator wall reflected my face, thinner than it was half a year ago, with dark circles under my eyes. I straightened my jacket, folded the pregnancy test result and tucked it into the side pocket. The elevator doors opened. The receptionist froze for a second when she saw me, then quickly looked down, avoiding my gaze. I didn't think much of it and pushed the door open to the main conference room. The entire product department was there, along with middle managers from other teams. Over 100 people packed into the room. A line of blue text was displayed on the big screen. Ruekang Medical 2025 Product Strategy Realignment Meeting. He was standing in front of the screen, pausing at the end of a segment. He turned his head, saw me, and his brow furrowed slightly. Then, in a detached, businesslike tone, he said, Su Yue, perfect timing. There's an announcement I need to make today. Before I could process it, the PPT on the screen flipped to the next page. It was originally an organizational chart, and under the product director column, my name had been written, but now the 3 characters Su Yue had been deleted and replaced with Bai Ruolin. A small footnote below read, effective immediately. There was 2 seconds of silence in the conference room. Everyone turned to look at me. Xiao Ju from Randi Group 6 stared with his mouth open. Old Ma adjusted his glasses, and a few women from the marketing department nudged each other with their elbows. Bai Ruolin was sitting in the second row by the aisle, wearing a creamy white suit skirt, an electronic pen in her hand, and a perfectly measured look of surprise on her face, as if even she hadn't expected this. I stood at the doorway, my hand touching the folded edge of the pregnancy test result in my pocket, and heard my own heartbeat pulsing out through my ears. He said, due to health reasons, Su Yue is stepping down as product director effective today. Bai Ruolin will temporarily take over her duties. Ruolin has been with me for 3 years and is highly capable. Please cooperate well with her. Only after finishing did he turn his face toward me. The look he gave me was no different from the one he would give an employee who had just completed their resignation formalities. My throat tightened, but I still tried to ask as clearly as possible, what health reasons? I have never submitted any leave request, nor have I done any handover. He came down 2 steps and lowered his voice, yet I could sense the unmistakable tone of finality. You know perfectly well yourself, you haven't been in good shape lately. Project progress has been delayed and you've had several conflicts with our partners. Letting you rest is being responsible to everyone. Which project is lagging behind? Which partner has conflicts? Pull up the emails, dig out the meeting minutes, and let's go through them one by one. I said. He didn't respond. Bai Ruolin stood up at that moment and said in a soft voice, Yue, don't be like this. President Song is only looking out for you. You've really been working too hard lately. We all know that. Looking at her expression, which screamed, I totally understand you, my stomach suddenly turned. It wasn't morning sickness, it was pure disgust. I ignored her, took a step toward the conference table, and pulled the sheet from my pocket, intending to place it in his hand. I said, Song Ji, I came back with these results today and I wanted to tell you something. He took the sheet, opened it and glanced at it. The line of bold black text clearly said 6 weeks pregnant. He stared at it for 3 seconds, his frown deepening even more than before, then closed the sheet as if handling a troublesome document. He looked at me and said, let's get a divorce. The voice was not loud, but close enough for those nearby to hear. Bai Ruolin stood half a meter behind him, her eyes lighting up for a moment before she quickly lowered her head, playing the role of an innocent young secretary who had no idea what was going on. "Wolin has 6 months left," he said, his tone as if he were allocating a spot. "She needs this position as a transitional step to make her resume look better. We'll talk again once she's transferred back to the administrative track." I stood before him, my hand still suspended in midair, empty. He had already taken the form from me, but the way he looked at it was the same as if he were looking at a piece of scrap paper. Someone in the meeting room was secretly taking photos. A young woman from Rand Group 3 had red-rimmed eyes and kept her head down, not daring to speak. Old Ma turned his head toward the window. Wolin gently tugged at Songji's sleeve as if she wanted him to stop talking, but the way she tugged made it clear to everyone she had already won. I didn't shout, didn't slam the table, and didn't throw my phone at the screen. I pulled my hand back, put it in the other pocket, and felt my phone. I unlocked it, opened the voice recorder, and pressed the stop button. Then I opened my contacts, scrolled to a name, Qin Yu, and sent the first message. "Attorney Qin, please check the authorization status of the patents under my name, 3 entries." After sending it, I turned off the phone screen and looked up at him. "Fine," I said, "I'll sign the agreement with you, but I need to do something in this building this afternoon, and you have no right to stop me." His brow twitched. Without waiting for his answer, I turned and walked out of the conference room. On the projection screen behind me, my name had been completely removed, just like that 6-year relationship. No retention period, no explanation, directly overwritten the moment the elevator doors closed. I smoothed the creases on the pregnancy test report again. Facing the stainless steel panel smudged with fingerprints, I carefully took off everything that bore the Ruekang logo: access card, ID badge, data disk, project manual, and laid them neatly on the elevator handrail. When I reached the first floor and stepped out of the revolving door, my phone rang. Attorney Qin's message: "I've checked, all your related patents at Ruekang were filed before you joined the company, so ownership is 100% in your personal name. The company has never signed a formal licensing agreement. The sales contracts currently in use are technical guarantees you made under your personal name while you were in office. They're not licensing documents. You can cut off supply at any time." I stared at those lines for a long time, then I got into the car and started the engine. As I turned the steering wheel, I didn't head home, nor did I head to the rental apartment I'd been living in. Instead, I drove straight to the north gate of the First People's Hospital of the city, parked the car, and pulled up the SMS with my appointment number: obstetrics and gynecology, 3rd floor, left at the elevator corridor. I had booked a surgery slot. Before getting into the elevator, I received a call from my best friend Jiang Ning. She sounded extremely anxious on the other end, saying she had just heard about what happened at my company. That bitch Wolin had posted a subtle new office on her Moments with a photo of what used to be my workstation. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine. Where are you now?" I glanced at the lit floor buttons in the elevator and said, "The hospital." She was silent for a few seconds, then said, "I'm coming over." I said, "No need, I can handle it alone." After hanging up, I walked into the obstetrics corridor. Several pregnant women were sitting on the bench, each accompanied by someone holding their bags and water cups. I sat alone on the plastic chair by the door, took out my ID card and medical insurance card and placed them on my lap. My number appeared on the queue display screen. I stood up, took the prenatal test report out of my pocket, glanced at the line that said fetal heartbeat detected, then folded the paper back up and tucked it into my phone case. The operating room door closed behind me that same evening. Ruekang Medical Technology Group's internal system updated its organizational structure. In the product director column, the name Wolin was officially entered. Someone in the company group chat posted "Congratulations, Director Bai," followed by a string of replies. I lay on the bed in the surgical observation room, logged out of the company's WeChat work, deleted Songji's phone number, unfollowed all the public accounts related to Ruekang, and directly cancelled the personal phone number I had used for 6 years. After doing all this, I placed my phone face down on the bedside table and closed my eyes. The day after the surgery, I did not rest, not because I didn't want to, but because within Ruekang's Randi department system, all the shared permissions, technical backend access, and encrypted database visit logs I had set up were still under my name. I had to withdraw everything before they realized what was happening. At 7:30 in the morning, my car stopped on the B2 level of the underground garage. When I took the elevator up to the 16th floor, the receptionist at the front desk saw me and nearly dropped her thermos. I bypassed her and walked straight toward the product R&D center. The door to my office, no, now it's her office, was open. Rowland sat in my ergonomic chair scrolling through something on the computer screen. When she saw me come in, she was momentarily taken aback, then quickly smiled. Yue, you're here early. I've come for the handover. I placed a transparent file folder on the desk. Inside was a project list, but not the full one. I didn't intend to leave the technical documents for the core projects here. Handing over the computer was fine, but every technical parameter, raw experimental data and prototype test record involved in my personal patents had been backed up to the cloud, and I was the super administrator of that cloud account. Rowland flipped through the list and said, Yue, General Manager Song says some projects need to be fully transferred to me, including all the R&D progress and data for the Smart Infusion Pump 3.0 that you've been working on. That one won't work, I said. She was taken aback for a moment. Why not? Because the underlying technology of that project uses my personal patent and there's no technical licensing agreement with the company. I looked at her, my tone very flat, as if stating something already decided long ago. If you want to take it over, first have legal affairs contact my lawyer to negotiate the license. You should understand that process, right? Rowland's smile faded a little. She leaned back in her chair and said in the tone of someone who is now a director, but you were the product director before, and this project was clearly developed at the company. What happened before stays in the past. What matters is now. I flipped past the page in the project list marked Smart Infusion Pump 3.0 and drew a slash next to it with my pen. I am withdrawing my authorization for this project. It will be sealed starting today. Until the formal authorization agreement is signed, no one is allowed to access any related data. Having said that, I opened my phone, logged into Ruekang's internal technical backend, and revoked all advanced permissions for the Smart Infusion Pump 3.0 folder right in front of her. A red notification popped up on the screen. You have removed access for 13 members, including Rowland. She stood up, her voice finally rising a notch. Suyue, you have no right to do this. I do. I turned the screen to show her and then pulled it back. You're sitting at my workstation right now, but the patent isn't anything that belongs to this building, remember that. As I turned to leave, I ran right into Deputy General Manager Wang at 56. He was a founding member of Ruekang and a trusted ally of Songji's mother year-round. He wore a grey suit and a grey tie, much like his stance, always on the side of the company's interests, which meant the Song family's side. Xiaosu, he blocked my way, his tone that of a senior figure. I've heard about it. Don't act on impulse. You've stayed with Ruekang all these years. General Manager Song won't treat you unfairly. Adjust your attitude. Go admit your mistake to him. As for the patent issue, we'll handle it internally. Don't take it outside. I looked at him and said, admit what mistake? Oh, you kid. He sighed and lowered his voice. Don't let your personal feelings disrupt the company's operations. You need to think about the bigger picture. The big picture is that my technology has been supporting 2 product lines. Yet no one has ever signed a licensing agreement with me, and yesterday I was directly removed from the meeting. I said, Vice President Wang, let's set aside emotions. You can discuss the contract with me instead. His expression changed. Without saying another word to him, I walked around him and left the R&D center lobby. Behind me, over 20 R&D engineers in their cubicles were all watching this direction. No one spoke. The sound of typing had completely stopped. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed, a new text message from a number not saved in my contacts, but I recognized the digits. Tang Jianshan, R&D Director of Hengtai Medical Group, a well-known medical device expert in the industry. We met at an industry summit 3 years ago and had sporadic technical exchanges since then. He never hid his admiration for me, but back then I was fully devoted to Ruekang and always politely declined. The message read, Suyue, I heard you're a free agent now. My door is always open. The 3 patent licenses you mentioned, we can talk about them separately. Name your price. I stared at the message and made a decision in the few seconds before the elevator doors closed. Reply, tomorrow at 3 p.m. See you at Hengtai. After sending the message, I put my phone back in my pocket and walked out of the underground garage exit. Old Zhong, the security guard, nodded at me from his booth. Since I no longer had an access card, he manually raised the barrier for me. Take care, Director Su. Don't call me director anymore. I said. Just call me Su Yue. He paused for a moment then said, Miss Su. The car exited the underground garage and the sunlight hitting the windshield was a bit dazzling. I glanced at the access card and work badge on the passenger seat, stowed them both in the glove box, and then sent a message to Attorney Chin, arrange an official meeting with Legal Affairs to discuss the licensing agreement, and also help me draft a divorce agreement. Attorney Chin replied quickly, already drafted, waiting for your signature. I propped my phone on the holder and set the navigation to the First People's Hospital of the city. I had a follow-up appointment today as the car turned at the Wenhui Road intersection. The rooftop logo of Ruekang Building flashed briefly in the rearview mirror. Though I didn't take another look, the follow-up appointment was at 10 in the morning. In the obstetrics and gynecology corridor, many pregnant women had come for prenatal checkups. In front of each woman stood a man holding a bag. Some were looking down at their phones, others leaning in to listen to the doctor's instructions. I walked past them, got a number at the nurse's station and sat down on the chair in the farthest corner to wait. While waiting, I called Lawyer Chin and went over the patent timeline. The first patent, Dynamic Monitoring System for Infusion Flow Rate, was filed 8 months before I joined Ruekang. The second, Portable Microinfusion Pump, was filed the week after my master's thesis defense. The third, Integrated Module for Smart Infusion Pumps, was filed during my annual leave without using any company equipment. Every single item has a timestamp and email trail plus cloud backups and notarized copies. Lawyer Chin said on the other end, solid evidence, don't worry. What about the divorce agreement? It's done as you requested. There's no division of joint property. The marital home is under Songji's name alone, and you paid the rent yourself for the apartment you live in. The two of you have been largely financially independent these past 6 years. She paused. The only thing I didn't include is compensation for emotional distress. Are you sure you don't want to bring that up? No, bringing it up would only make it seem like I still care. Attorney Chin paused for a moment then said, all right, when will you sign? Tomorrow. After hanging up the phone, the queue number buzzer called my name. I walked into the consultation room. The doctor was a woman in her 40s wearing gold-rimmed glasses. She looked at my follow-up sheet for a moment, then looked up and said, your recovery is going okay, but you still need to rest. Did you come by yourself? Yes. She glanced at the door, didn't ask further, gave a few more instructions on precautions, and prescribed some medication. When I took the prescription slip, she added, your health comes first, everything else can wait. I nodded and walked out of the room. On the way to the pharmacy, I passed through the maternity ward. A woman who had just given birth was being wheeled out, her entire family crowded around the bed. Her husband's eyes were red with emotion. I glanced over but didn't slow down, heading straight to queue at the pharmacy window. After picking up my medication, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the Civil Affairs Bureau, not to file for divorce. Songji hadn't signed the papers yet. I just wanted to check the hours. The notice at the bureau's entrance listed the working hours, Tuesday to Friday. I took a photo of the schedule and sent it to Lawyer Chin. Make an appointment for him on Wednesday for me. With that done, I returned to my car and scrolled through my phone's contacts, starting from S until I found Songji, defunct. I had changed the note to that at the hospital yesterday. Long press, delete, WeChat, work WeChat, Alipay contacts, shared albums, family sharing plan. One by one, I removed all traces of connection. The screen was clean now, so clean it felt a little empty. I parked the car by the river and rolled down the window. The April breeze blew in, carrying a hint of fishy smell and moisture. My phone buzzed again with a news alert. Ruekang Medical Technology had released its 2025 new product plan, and the Smart Infusion Pump 3.0 still appeared in the product line preview, accompanied by a staged photo of by Wolin in a lab coat. I opened the news article and scrolled to the bottom. Under the product technical support section, my name was still listed. I took a screenshot, saved it, and forwarded it to Attorney Chin. She replied, this goes into the evidence package. I placed my phone on my lap, leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. I didn't cry, nor did I feel like the sky was falling. I just felt tired, but not the kind of tired that needs to be known by others. It was like pressing the stop button on a long recording. The world suddenly falls silent, and only then do you realize just how loud the background noise had always been. Then the phone vibrated for the third time. This time, it was a system notification from Ruekang's internal system. Hello, your super admin permissions have been manually revoked. Please contact the new administrator by Wolin. This notification came a full 11 hours later than it should have. Looked like the tech team had been working on the back end overnight. I let out a cold laugh, didn't reply, and directly logged into the cloud drive to download the last batch of unarchived raw data to my local hard drive. The download progress bar moved quickly. At 100%, I logged out of Ruekang's enterprise cloud and deactivated my account. A pop-up appeared on my phone. Deactivation successful. Thank you for using our service. Then I opened WeChat. Pinned Tang Genshin's chat. And typed a line, I'll bring the patent list tomorrow. Have your legal team prepare the tech licensing framework. My condition is that the licensing fee be settled annually, no lower than market rate, and I will not accept any form of buyout. Tang Genshin replied instantly, deal. I put my phone aside and started the car. Tomorrow is Thursday and the day after is Friday. I have a lot to do. Attorney Chin's legal letter will arrive at Ruekang on Thursday, and by Wolin will receive the first formal notice of patent infringement risk. What I need to do next is not quarrel with her or negotiate with Songji, but let the entire industry know I, Su Yue, am repricing my technology. As the car turned out of the riverside parking strip, the city's skyline grew smaller in the rearview mirror. For 6 years, I had revolved around another building, thinking it was the center of the world. Now it seems that building was just an intersection, and I've just passed through on a green light at 10 a.m. on Thursday. Attorney Chin's legal letter arrived at Ruekang Tower, a piece of paper with 3 lines of bold text. Your company's product line involves 3 personal patents owned by Ms. Su Yue. As of the date of this letter, no authorization agreement has been signed. Please cease all related production and sales activities within 3 working days, otherwise we will apply for a pre-litigation injunction in accordance with the law. When the front desk received the document, they took a photo and sent it to Bai Ruolin. Bai Ruolin forwarded it directly to Songji with the caption, "What does Sister Yue mean by this?" Songji did not reply to her message. He called me directly. This was the first time in 3 days he had taken the initiative to contact me. When the screen lit up with the name Songji, I was in a conference room on the 16th floor of Hungtai Medical's headquarters discussing licensing details with Tang Genshin and Hungtai's legal team. I glanced at the screen, muted my phone and placed it face down on the table. The phone disconnected by itself. Then it rang again. By the 3rd time I stood up, gestured to Tang Genshin, and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window to answer it. What do you mean by this? Songji's voice was very low, but that kind of low wasn't calm, it was gritted teeth. You received the letter, didn't you? I said, looking out at the city view. It's all clearly written there, so I won't repeat it. Su Yue, the Smart Infusion Pump 3.0 is going into the final assembly line next week, and you're pulling this on me now. What exactly are you trying to do? What do I want? I turned around and leaned against the glass curtain wall. I want to stop you from using my stuff. Is that so hard to understand? There was a 2-second silence on the other end of the line. Then he changed his tone, not the commanding one from before, but that half-soft, half-hard voice he always used whenever he needed my cooperation. Come to the office, we'll talk face to face. I'll be waiting in my office. Fine. I hung up, walked back to the conference table and sat down. Tang Genshin glanced at me but didn't ask much, only said, "Do you need me to come with you?" "No need." I snapped my laptop shut. "It's about what you just said. Can Hung Tai send over the offer letter today?" 10 minutes. Good. 10 minutes later, Hung Tai's HR department sent out an email with an attached employment contract. Chief R&D Scientist. Annual salary of 3.2 million with technical licensing fees to be settled separately. I forwarded the email to my personal account, closed the laptop, stood up and shook hands with Tang Genshin. "Congratulations on joining Hungtai." He smiled. "Though I guess you've got a not-so-pleasant date to go to next." "Just meeting my ex-husband," I said. When the car stopped downstairs at Ruekang Tower, old Zhong, the security guard, saw my car and leaned out of the booth with a look that said he didn't know what to do. I nodded at him. He hesitated, then still raised the barrier for me. Up on the 16th floor, the atmosphere was completely different from 2 days ago. The vibe at the Product R&D Center was strange. When some people saw me come in, they froze for a moment, then quickly lowered their heads and pretended to stare at their screens. Little Ju from R&D Group 6 secretly gave me a thumbs up, then immediately pulled his hand back. As I passed the break room, I heard someone in a lowered voice say, "The legal department has exploded. The president's Office is at the end of the corridor. Before I reached the door, Vice President Wang came up to greet me, extending his hand from a distance. Xiao Su, you're here, don't get upset, let's all sit down and talk things over. He kept rubbing his fingers together, a thin layer of sweat on his forehead. Ignoring his hand, I pushed the door open and walked straight into the office. Song Ji sat behind the large desk, the legal letter spread out before him. Bai Wolin stood by the sofa, holding a tablet, her face wearing a carefully maintained expression of composure. Seeing me enter, she spoke first. Yue, don't you think this is a bit harsh? Giving the company only 3 days, aren't you trying to drive it into a dead end? I'm not talking to you. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, placing a document on the desk and sliding it over. Song Ji, here is the patent list and the application timeline. Every entry is notarized, look it over before you speak. He picked up the document, flipped through it, and his expression gradually darkened. After finishing, he put the document down and said, You've never mentioned patent ownership before. You've been the product director at my company for 6 years, and you've handled all these projects. Now you're telling me the patents are yours. Have you ever asked? I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands on my knees. Have you ever asked where these technologies came from? Do you know who spent 3 months in a graduate lab working on the first infusion pump prototype? Do you know that when I interviewed at Ruekang, my resume already made it clear that the patents existed before the job? He didn't answer. Bai Wolin interjected. But you've worked at the company for so many years, and the company has invested so many resources. Even if it's your personal patent, the company should still have contributed something. Did you even take a law class? I interrupted her, still looking at Song Ji. According to Article 6 of the patent law, the criterion for a service invention is an invention creation completed primarily by using the unit's material and technical conditions. All 3 of my patents were filed before my start date, and their development did not use any of Ruekang's equipment. Your company doesn't even have a proper dry lab. Do I need to remind you of that? Bai Wolin opened her mouth, but no words came out. I took a folded piece of paper from my bag, flattened it, and placed it on top of the patent list. It was a photocopy of the pregnancy test result from 3 days ago, still bearing Song Ji's fingerprints. I slid the copy in front of him and said, I recorded exactly what you said that day. Do you think that word getting out about a wife who just found out she's pregnant, having her position openly taken away by her husband during a company-wide meeting, would make Minkang Hospital renew their contract with Ruekang? Isn't their general manager Sun most concerned about his partner's corporate ethics? Song Ji's hands rested on the table, his knuckles slowly tightening. Just then, the landline on his office desk rang. He glanced at the caller ID and his expression changed completely. The caller ID showed 3 words, Sun, General Manager of Minkang. He picked up and pressed the speakerphone. General Manager Song. Sun's voice came through the receiver, carrying a detached, businesslike tone. Our legal team just finished reviewing the contract and found that your company's technical support clauses include a personal patent belonging to Ms. Su Yue, but you haven't attached the original patent authorization letter. I need to meet with the patent holder in person. The contract is hereby put on hold. Song Ji's shoulders dropped by less than a centimeter. Others wouldn't notice, but I did. Bai Wolin grew anxious and leaned in, saying, President Sun, I'm Bai Wolin, the product director. Weekend, Miss Bai. President Sun's tone remained unchanged. I've reviewed the technical specifications you sent me last time. Several key figures don't match the previous version, so I insist on coordinating directly with Engineer Su. This isn't aimed at anyone, it's about being responsible to the hospital. The call ended. The office fell silent for a few seconds. Song Ji looked at me, his Adam's apple bobbing slightly. I took the divorce agreement out of my bag and placed it in front of him. Next to it was his pen. I picked it up for him and set it beside the document. Sign it, I said, and then we'll talk about the patents. He stared at the agreement without moving. Bai Wolin stood by the sofa, her face nearly as pale as the milk-white suit she was wearing. Sunlight streamed through the window onto the conference table, illuminating the patent numbers with perfect clarity, numbers I had spent years applying for. One by one, every single one of them bore his name. No, his company wanted to use those numbers, but not once had my name ever been mentioned at any annual meeting. Song Ji finally spoke, his voice hoarse as if muffled through water. Yue, we can sign here. I pushed the pen another inch closer to his hand. Sun Xian, the general manager of Minkang Hospital, was a 52-year-old from Zhejiang province who had been in procurement for 2 decades. His most famous move came 10 years ago when a supplier tampered with technical specifications. He immediately terminated an 8-figure contract and even wrote the supplier's name into the report at the industry association's briefing. His nickname in the industry was Sun No Swap. If the tech didn't meet the standards, no one could take their place. So when he personally requested a face-to-face meeting with me, Bai Wolin should have realized she was in over her head. But Bai Wolin wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. She wanted to roll the dice. On Friday afternoon, Secretary Sun called the Rueikang product department and asked Su Gong to come over for a chat. Bai Wolin took the call and directly said, "Su Yue no longer works at Rueikang. I'm Bai Wolin, product director, and I've coordinated with you before. I can come on behalf of the company." The person on the other end hesitated briefly, then finally said to bring the technical documents. Bai Wolin thought this was her opportunity. She brought a thick stack of materials, all the technical files stored on our R&D center computers, including some prototype test data that I hadn't had time to withdraw, and then took 2 people from the marketing department with her to the procurement department of Minkang Hospital. Sun Zian was waiting for her in the conference room. Only he sat alone on the opposite side of the long table, flanked by the director of Minkang's medical equipment department and 2 technical specialists in charge of procurement. Bai Wolin walked in with a sweet smile and said, "Mr. Sun, on behalf of Rueikang, I'm here to present the technical solution for the infusion pump 3.0. Su Yue's previous responsibilities have been fully taken over by me." Sun Zian gave a grunt and opened the first page of the document. When he turned to the 3rd page, he pointed at a parameter and asked, "For this error compensation algorithm for infusion flow rate, why is the time window set to 30 seconds? If the patient's blood flow velocity fluctuates beyond this window due to different body positions, won't the data be distorted?" Bai Wolin paused, then said, "This is our mature solution validated by extensive clinical testing. As for the specific data," she flipped a few pages, pointed to a chart and said, "As you can see here, the fluctuation range is entirely within the safe zone." Sun Zian didn't speak, but the technical specialist behind him spoke up first. "Director Bai, the chart you're pointing to is for steady-state body position data. What I'm asking about is the compensation mechanism during the instant of position change. There's a whole section on this in the technical white paper released last year by your engineer Su. Can you explain the dynamic compensation logic?" Bai Wolin's smile began to stiffen. She flipped through the documents for a long time, head down, and finally said, "My R&D team is working on the final version of this detail right now. The documents I brought today are from the previous version." Sun Zian closed the document, took off his glasses to wipe them, put them back on, and then said, "Miss Bai, there are at least 5 pieces of data in your document that don't match what I confirmed with engineer Su at the time. I'm not sure if this is due to an issue with your internal version control or something else. Go back and tell General Manager Song to have engineer Su come talk to me. If engineer Su doesn't come, we'll transfer this batch of contracts to Hungtai. They have provided very complete materials, including the dynamic compensation logic you mentioned. The technical documents were already on my desk this morning." Bai Wolin's face instantly turned pale. She managed a strained smile and said, "Mr. Sun, Hungtai might. I've known Tang Genshin, R&D director at Hungtai, for 8 years. I know exactly who wrote the technical documents he submitted." Sun Zian stood up, making his intent clear. "Sorry to have you all make a wasted trip." The moment Bai Wolin walked out of Minkang's procurement department, her eyes reddened in front of the 2 people from the marketing department. She got into the car heading back to the company and called Song Ji, her voice trembling as she said, "Song, Mr. Sun insists on meeting Sister Yue. He said Hungtai has already sent over the complete set of technical documents." Song Ji was silent on the other end for a long while, then said only 3 words, "Got it." At 4:30 that afternoon, I received a message from attorney Qin. Song Ji has asked me to meet him at his office on Saturday at 10 a.m. to sign the divorce agreement. The patent matters will be discussed as well. I replied, "Got it." Then I put on Hungtai's employee jacket and went to the company's onboarding dinner. The new colleagues were very warm. Tang Genshin introduced me to the R&D team, saying, "This is Su Yue. She will build all your R&D direction and patent system from now on." More than 20 engineers applauded below, and someone egged on Su to say a few words. I stood up and said only one thing. I hope every project you work on here is rock solid in technology and watertight in patents." Everyone laughed. Tang Jianchen glanced at me and nodded gently. On Saturday morning I stood once again at the foot of Ruekang Tower. This time I didn't drive into the basement garage but parked by the roadside. Old Zhong, the security guard, saw me from a distance and proactively opened the main door for me. He still called me Director Su. I didn't correct him, just smiled at him, then went straight through the lobby and into the elevator. As the elevator doors closed, I checked the things in my bag: 3 original patent certificates, 1 Hungtai employment contract, 1 signed divorce agreement and a voice recorder. When the elevator reached the 16th floor, the doors opened with a ding. Bai Wolin was standing at the elevator entrance as if she had been waiting for me. Her eyes were still red, but her expression had shifted from yesterday's panic to a forced annoyance. Seeing me step out, she took a step back and lowered her voice. "Are you happy now, making me look foolish in front of the client? Does that please you?" Without slowing my pace, I replied as I walked. "I never asked you to represent me to the client. You decided you could take my place." She hurried a few steps to catch up, raising her voice half a notch. "But all that data was still on the company computer. Why didn't you clear it out when you left? If you don't clear it, aren't you just waiting for someone to step into a trap?" I stopped, turned to face her and said, "When you went through my computer, didn't you have superadmin rights? Aren't you the product director? Can't you tell real data from fake?" She was left speechless. I continued, "Bai Wolin, from the very first minute you sat down in my office, you should have understood that positions can be swapped but technical judgment cannot. Your failure in front of Mr. Sun today wasn't because I set you up, it was because you don't understand the fundamental logic of this project. Yet you insisted that you do." 2 interns were standing at the entrance to the break room, barely able to hold onto the cups in their hands. Bai Wolin noticed the surrounding glances, pressed her lips into a thin line and finally squeezed out just 4 words: "Just you wait." I withdrew my gaze and continued walking toward the CEO's office. The hallway was especially quiet today. As I passed the product R&D center, I saw Xiao Ju from R&D Group 6 mouth something to me from his workstation. "General Manager Sun called Mr. Song yesterday. He was very angry." I nodded and pushed open the door to the CEO's office. Song Ji was wearing a dark blue suit today, his hair combed even neater than usual. In front of him lay the divorce agreement and next to it my patent list. Deputy General Manager Wang stood to his left and Director Chen from Legal stood to his right. This lineup was clearly well prepared. When Song Ji saw me come in, he didn't get up, only raised his chin slightly to signal me to sit down. I placed my bag on my lap and sat down in a relaxed posture. He spoke first. "Yue, meet with President Sun of Minkang and let this matter pass. The infusion pump 30 must go into the final assembly line next week. Every day of delay costs the company over $1 million. As for the patent licensing, sign a long-term contract. The company will pay you an annual fee based on market rates and all terms are negotiable." That sounds reasonable, but I've been with him for 6 years. I know his negotiation sequence all too well. He always secures the most important things first, having me stabilize President Sun, getting me to sign the authorization, and only then does he bring up what truly matters to me. The divorce agreement is always last. I pushed the divorce agreement across the table toward him. "Sign it first." He frowned. "Don't mix everything together. You're the one mixing everything together." I looked at him, my voice very calm. "You mixed it together when you gave my position to Bai Wolin at the general meeting. You mixed it together when you brought up the divorce. And you mixed it together when you used my technology without authorization." From my bag I took out the 3 patent certificates and laid them neatly on the table. "This isn't you negotiating a deal with me, this is you coming to solve a problem I created." I set the order. "Sign the divorce agreement first, then we'll talk about the rest." Deputy General Manager Wang tried to mediate, saying, "Xiao Su, it's all for the good of the company, why make it so difficult?" Deputy General Manager Wang. I turned to him. "Last time I told you if you want to talk to me, make it about the contract. Since you're representing the company now, please speak to me as the company. You don't have to call me Engineer Su, just call me MS Su." Deputy General Manager Wang's face turned ashen. He glanced at Song Ji and said nothing more. Song Ji picked up the divorce agreement and flipped to the last page. I hadn't written a single word on it, only my signature, Su Yue, neatly placed in my designated space. He looked up at me, twirling a pen in his hand, a gesture I knew all too well. It was something he always did when weighing pros and cons. After about 10 seconds of spinning the pen, he wrote his own name in the other signature line, Song-ji. Then he pushed the agreement back across the table and said, "I've signed it, now let's settle Minkang's issue." I put the agreement into my bag, zipped it up and stood. He looked at me from behind his desk, waiting for me to bring up the patent licensing. Looking straight at him and the two people waiting behind him, I said word by word, "What you just signed is a divorce agreement, not a patent licensing agreement. As for the patent, I'm not discussing it today." He shot to his feet, bracing his hands on the desk. I turned and walked toward the door with my hand on the handle. I glanced back at him and said, "As for whether infusion pump 30 can enter the final assembly line next week, I suggest your legal team assess the infringement risk. I've already joined Hungtai, my people, you will never get to use them for free." President Sun chose a place no one expected, the panoramic conference room on the top floor of the Minkang Hospital Administrative Building. The floor-to-ceiling windows faced directly onto the city's central axis, offering a view of half the urban area. When he picked this spot, I remembered a joke he once made: "Doing business here, no one dares to lie because heaven is watching from above." It was 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning. 3 long tables were arranged in a U-shape. On the left sat Ruekang's team, Song-ji, Deputy General Manager Wang, the head of legal, and by Ruolin. On the right sat Hungtai's team, Tang Jienshin, Hungtai's investment director, and me. Sun Xian sat at the base of the U with 2 letters of intent spread before him. One was for Ruekang Medical Technology, the other for Hungtai Medical Group, separated only by a water cup. "I've invited both sides today to make things clear," Sun Xian said without preamble. "Minkang intends to purchase 300 smart infusion pumps, for a total of 46 million. I originally planned to award this order to Ruekang. You've worked with Chief Engineer Su for so many years, so I'm confident in your technology, but there's a problem now." He picked up the copy of the legal letter on the table and waved it toward Song-ji. "The patent holder of Ruekang's core technology is Ms. Su Yue as an individual, and she has not granted any authorization to Ruekang. My principle is simple: whoever owns the technology, I sign with them. It's not about whom I pay, but if the equipment I buy fails, people will point fingers at me." The conference room was so quiet that the sound of the air conditioning vents could be heard. By Ruolin sat on Song-ji's right, twisting her lanyard under the table. She wasn't wearing makeup today, perhaps because she'd embarrassed herself in front of President Sun last time and was deliberately keeping a low profile. But her demeanor had nothing to do with low profile. The way she stared at me was still the same look she gave me at the elevator entrance when she said, "Just you wait." Sun Xian looked at Song-ji. "President Song, you go first and state your position." Song-ji cleared his throat and shifted forward in his seat. He was wearing his most expensive suit today, his cufflinks reflecting the sunlight. "President Sun, there have indeed been some misunderstandings within Ruekang, but these are not insurmountable issues. Su Yue is my wife." He glanced at me as he said those 4 words. My expression didn't change, so he continued, "Between her and me, it's just a minor breakdown in communication. Today, in front of you, if we just sign the authorization, everything will return to normal. The production schedule for infusion pump 30 won't be delayed, and we have a full team for after-sales technical support." He spoke very well. Every word sounded like a matter of course. If the company-wide meeting 3 days ago hadn't happened, I probably would have done what I always did, nodded and played along to help him put on the act. Sun Xian did not respond after hearing that. Instead, he turned his head directly to me and asked, "Engineer Su, what do you think?" I didn't rush to answer. I picked up the folder in front of me, opened it to the first page and spread it flat on the table. It was an authorization agreement I had asked Attorney Chin to draft overnight, but it wasn't signed with Ruekang, it was signed with me personally. The terms were clearly stated. Patent holder Su Yue grants direct authorization to Minkang Hospital in her personal capacity, without any third-party company as an intermediary. The licensing fee is settled per unit at 1,200 yuan per unit. For technical support during the warranty period, I will take the lead personally, with Hungtai Medical serving as the technical collaborator, providing laboratory and team support. The brilliance of these terms lies in the fact that, legally speaking, if Ruekang wants to supply Minkang, every infusion pump it produces must use my patent, and my patent has not been licensed to Ruekang at all. So if Sun Xian signs this direct authorization with me today, Ruekang will be completely out of the game. It won't even have the qualification to enter into a contractual relationship with the client after Songji finished reading the document. The change in his expression was clearly visible even from 2 meters away. He leaned closer to me and said in a low voice, "Yue, don't burn all your bridges." I placed the pen next to the agreement, looked at Sun Zian and said, "Mr. Sun, in my 6 years as product director at Ruekang, I have never received any form of royalty payment for these 3 patents. The day I walked into the company with my pregnancy test results, he announced in a staff meeting in front of 200 people that I was stepping down due to health reasons. 2 minutes later, he told me we were getting a divorce. I pulled the photocopy of the pregnancy test results from my folder and laid it in the middle of the desk, not pushing it toward anyone, just letting it sit there. I might be able to overlook what happened on a personal level, but as for my patents, I won't let Ruekang use them for free for even one more day." Sun Zian glanced at the photocopy, and when he looked back up, his eyes were slightly red. He isn't the type to wear his heart on his sleeve, but he has a wife and daughter, and he has seen too many businessmen who treat people's hearts like standard components. He looked at me and asked, "Su, are you planning to sign with Hunkai or as an individual?" "As an individual," I said. "I can bring my skills to any company, but the patents will always be mine. I'm not here trying to snatch this deal for Hunkai. I'm sitting here in my own name." Sun Zian turned to the last page of the letter of intent to purchase, extended his hand to me and said, "Then Su, happy cooperation." Everyone at Ruekang looked as if they had been slapped across the face. Songji's body stiffened in his chair, his eyes fixed on the letter of intent already signed by Sun Zian, his Adam's apple bobbing several times. Bai Wolin suddenly stood up and shouted at me, "This is your revenge. You've ruined the company's project. Is that fair to us?" "Fair." I put the pen back in my bag and slowly stood up. "Bai Wolin, the word fair should have appeared 3 days before I left. You don't get to ask me for it now." Just then Ruekang's legal director said softly to Songji, "Mr. Song, if Su Yue authorizes this in her personal capacity, then supplying goods according to the contract would constitute infringement, and Mingkang would sue us." Songji's face had already turned pale. He finally stood up and stepped in front of me in one stride. Only I could detect the faint tremor in his voice. "Yue, name your terms." I looked at him and thought back to 6 years ago when he first put the wedding ring on my finger. Back then he said, "Don't worry, no matter how big the company gets, you'll have the final say over the technology." 6 years later he stood before me, begging me to give him a verbal license for my patent so he could manufacture my product and sell it to a client who only recognized me. "Do you have the authority to sign?" I interrupted him. "You've already signed the divorce papers. That was the last time you signed anything related to me. From now on, every time you use one of my patents you sign once and the fee is settled per use, no credit." I slapped a temporary authorization onto the table, not a free pass, but a single-use license contract. The scope was limited to already signed orders, valid for 30 days at 3 times the market rate, and any secondary sub-licensing would be considered a breach of contract. Also, the precondition for signing this authorization is that you pay the deposit first. Once the full amount is received, I'll sign. He took the temporary authorization, his face as pale as the edge of a sheet of A4 paper. Bai Wolin looked at him, and finally stepped back, collapsing into a chair. The office light hit the water cup on the U-shaped desk. The surface of the water was perfectly still. On the 3rd day after the single-use authorization was signed, Ruekang finally shipped the first batch of goods to Mingkang using the temporary license, but this did not put Songji's mind at ease because the single-use license covered only 300 units and at least 3 of Ruekang's other 4 product lines used my patented technology. As long as I refused to sign a long-term license, Ruekang's production lines would remain suspended in mid-air. Songji's mother, Lin Xiuji, flew back on Friday afternoon at 6 to 7. She was the largest shareholder of Ruekang Group. Having started from scratch as a medical device agent, she was known in the circle as the iron chopsticks, hard and thin, capable of gripping any profit. She owned a villa in Sonia and spent 4 months there every winter. But this time she returned early because Songji had called her and mentioned 3 things. The Mingkang order had fallen through, Su Yue had suspended the patent license, and the product lines might be entirely shut down. At 3:00 p.m., Attorney Chin received an email from Rueikang's legal department. Rueikang Group would hold an emergency board meeting on Saturday morning with the agenda item ownership of core patents and determination of service inventions. Attorney Chin forwarded the email to me with a note. This meeting isn't about company business, it's aimed at you. At 9:00 a.m. Saturday, I walked into the 24th floor boardroom of Rueikang Tower with Attorney Chin. Around the long rectangular table sat about a dozen people. Lin Xiaoji was at the head, wearing a dark purple velvet jacket, her hair dyed jet black. Her eyes didn't look like those of a person in her 60s at all. Song Ji sat to her left, and to her right were Deputy General Manager Wang and Bai Ruolin. Bai Ruolin wore a grey suit today, her hair pulled back tightly against her scalp, clutching an exaggeratedly thick stack of documents. She had finally dropped the act. The way she looked at me was like she was staring at a problem that had to be eliminated. Everyone's here, Lin Xiaoji said, rapping her knuckles on the table. We're holding this meeting today because our company is facing a major risk. She paused, turning her gaze directly on me, a situation where a key technology is being controlled in a personal capacity by an internal person, threatening normal company operations. Su Yue, you served as product director at Rueikang for 6 years. All technical achievements related to infusion pumps during those 6 years should belong to the company. Now you're using those patents to hold the company hostage for an exorbitant price that is indefensible both ethically and in terms of corporate governance. I leaned back in my chair, resting my hands on the armrests, and looked at her. President Lin, patent law doesn't recognize moral claims, only ownership of rights. I'm not the one saying this. You had your legal team state it word for word in court back when you sued distributors over patent infringement. Attorney Chin took out a folder from beside him, containing the court transcripts from Lin Xiaoji's lawsuit against distributors for infringing Rueikang's intellectual property a decade ago. The core argument repeatedly emphasized by Rueikang's lawyers was the law protects innovation, not titles. Lin Xiaoji's expression shifted slightly, but she didn't take that bait. She pivoted to another angle. The product development was completed while you served as director, and the company invested substantial manpower and resources. Even if the patent applications were filed before your start date, the later improvements, refinements, and clinical testing were all done at Rueikang. We have strong grounds to claim that this part also constitutes the company's research achievements. President Lin, I said, looking her in the eye and enunciating each word, I suggest you have Vice President Wang pull up the product development process logs and have finance pull out the R&D expense allocation reports. Compare them with the development timeline for each of my patents. If Rueikang can prove that any critical R&D funding was allocated before my patent filing date, I will sign a free license on the spot. But if you can't produce that evidence, then what? Vice President Wang lowered his head and swiped his finger across his phone screen, pretending to search for documents. The CFO flipped through the reports in his hands, not daring to engage. The entire meeting room fell silent for about 5 seconds. Lin Xiaoji shot a glance at Vice President Wang. Seeing him look like he wanted to vanish into the floor, the muscles in her face twitched faintly at that moment. Bai Ruolin suddenly spoke up. But Engineer Su, there's one thing I'm particularly curious about. How much of the technical documentation you have here did you take with you when you left the company? All of this involves the company's data security. I had been waiting for this. I stood up, opened my laptop, and connected it to the projector in the conference room. On the large screen appeared a folder directory page with timestamps clearly displaying the creation dates of over a dozen folders, the earliest one dated to a month before my graduate thesis defense, 3 years earlier than Rueikang's founding. The second folder was from 2 months before I joined Rueikang, containing test videos of a physical prototype completed at a university's independent lab. The equipment nameplate in the background clearly read a university medical device lab. The third folder contained electronic receipts from the patent office showing the application numbers, filing dates, and payment records for 3 patents, every single date preceding my start date at Rueikang. One more thing of even greater importance, I double-clicked a folder and opened a technical document comparison sheet. Director Bai, the technical solution you presented last time at Minkang's general manager son's office, the error compensation formula in it doesn't match my original version. Did you later modify the parameters? She blurted out. So what if I changed it? Of course you can change it. I said, pressing the spacebar to bring up an email I had sent to the entire R&D team the day before I resigned. By Wolin's name was prominently listed among the recipients. A bolded line in the body of the email read, "The underlying algorithm of the Smart Infusion Pump 3.0 falls under the core protection scope of the patent. Any unauthorized modification constitutes infringement. Director by modifying an authorized technological core is an infringement under patent law. You just admitted to it." By Wolin's face flushed crimson, her lips quivered, but she couldn't utter a word. In Lin Shoji shot by Wolin a fierce glare, took a deep breath but still refused to relent. She adjusted her posture, leaning back slightly, and in the tone of a final statement in a courtroom said, "Even if all this is true, it doesn't prove that the patent doesn't belong to the company. Suyue, you can make excuses, but the fact remains that you and Song-ji are married, diverting marital assets. Before the law, you might not get away so easily. Are you referring to this patent when you talk about marital property?" I looked at her. "Then let me ask you this, when Song-ji's company distributed dividends from profits earned during our marriage, did you ever calculate a share for me? At any annual gala, did anyone ever acknowledge my technical contributions? I provided free technical back-end support to Ruekang for 6 years. Now you want to talk about marital property settlement. Shall we settle that as well?" The atmosphere in the meeting room shifted. 2 independent directors looked down at their phones and stopped participating in the discussion. Another director, older in age, took off his glasses and sighed as if he had lost patience with the farce. Just then, the door to the meeting room was pushed open from the outside. Lawyer Chin stood at the entrance, holding a sealed brown craft paper document envelope. She walked steadily to my side, placed the envelope on the table, opened it in front of everyone and pulled out a stack of notarized documents, all of them proving the timeline of the 3 patents applications, independent R&D records and judgment citations confirming they had no relation to any Ruekang project. "All evidence has been notarized by the Municipal Notary Public Office," Lawyer Chin said, scanning everyone around the table before finally fixing her gaze on Lin Shoji. "This afternoon, on behalf of MS Su, I will issue a second legal notice to Ruekang Medical Technology. If any unauthorized patented technology continues to be used for production, we will immediately apply to the court for a pre-litigation injunction. Litigation procedures and preservation measures will be initiated simultaneously." The last trace of composure finally vanished from Lin Shoji's face. Her lips pressed into a pale, taut line like a string pulled too tight, about to snap at any moment. Attorney Chin pushed the notarized documents toward Song-ji, who seemed already drained of the strength even to reach out and take them. I picked up my bag, stood, pressed down on Attorney Chin's shoulder and then let go, looking around at everyone at the conference table. "After today, I suggest you all reconsider the relationship between Ruekang and me. My technology is only legal with a signed license. I am the chief R&D scientist at Hungtai and also the patent holder. If Hungtai wants to use it, they have to pay. Ruekang will cost even more. This isn't revenge, it's the market price." After saying this, I walked around the long table toward the door. When I reached by Wolin's side, I paused for a moment without looking at her. "Oh, and Director Bai, you verbally admitted earlier in this meeting to modifying the core algorithm, and the entire session is being recorded. Don't you think the legal department would find a recording of infringement evidence more compelling than my resignation handover email?" Bai Wolin did not answer. The dull thud of her collapsing back into her chair was the last sound she made that day. In mid-month the weather turned warmer, but what truly made me feel the rising temperature was how dire Bai Wolin's situation had become. The recording from the board meeting was submitted by Attorney Chin to the Municipal Intellectual Property Office for filing the next day. Ruekang's legal department held an internal meeting overnight, and the conclusion was simple. Bai Wolin had admitted on the record to modifying the core algorithm, constituting willful infringement under patent law. If the case went to litigation, Ruekang would not only have to pay damages but could also face a pre-trial injunction affecting 3 production lines. Even as arrogant as Song-ji was, he knew this was not something his mother could fix by slamming the table. On Saturday night, he sent an internal email to all mid-level managers with carefully chosen wording. It is suggested that Bai Wolin temporarily step away from the product development post and cooperate with legal on an internal review. The product director role will be temporarily overseen by Deputy General Manager Wang. The email was not copied to Bai Ruolin. She found out from Deputy Wang herself, according to Xiao Ju from Randy Team 6 later describing it to me. Bai Ruolin threw things around right there in the office. She grabbed a folder from her desk and slammed it against the glass partition, making the entire pane rattle loudly. The intern in the break room was so frightened that she hid in the restroom. But Bai Ruolin is not the kind of person who sits around waiting for defeat. She took just one day to wipe away her tears and pull herself together. She went to see Song Ji and had a private conversation. Behind closed doors for 2 hours, no one knows exactly what they discussed, but early the next morning, I received a mass email. The sender was Bai Ruolin, and the recipients were Mingkang Hospital's purchasing department, Ruekang Legal, and 3 distributors I had no idea we had started cooperating with. The subject line read only, urgent clarification on the incorrect technical solutions received by some clients. The first sentence of the body called me out by name, some technical data left by former product director Su Yue during the handover contained calibration issues, which led to deviations when director Bai presented to clients. We deeply apologize and have launched an internal investigation. She changed her approach. Instead of fighting over credit, she switched to shifting blame. It's not that she doesn't understand the technology, it's that the data I left her was flawed. I sat in the office of Heng Taexin, finished reading the email and smiled. Tang Genshin happened to walk over with a cup of coffee, glanced at my screen and said, "This woman really just won't give up. Whether she gives up or not doesn't matter," I said, closing the email and opening another interface. "What matters is that when she sent that email, she must have forgotten that everything in the company leaves a log." I logged into the technical backend of Ruekang. No, to be precise, the data management backend I had backed up in the corporate cloud before leaving. It was a development collaboration platform where all our core technical files, test records, and algorithm modification logs were stored with timestamps and login IPs. I opened the folder for the Smart Infusion Pump 3.0 and pulled up the operation log from Bai Ruolin's first day on the job. I saw the entry clearly, April 8, 1547, login IP 192.168.1.103, internal network of the 16th floor product Randy Center. Action, modified file error compensation algorithm version 3.0, with the modification note reading remove some redundant parameters. By the time she made that modification, I had already left the company for 2 days. I took a screenshot of that log entry, and then another of the version comparison showing the file before and after modification. On the left was the original version I had archived, and on the right was her new version with the compensation parameters deleted. The differences were highlighted in red, clear at a glance. Then I looked up another more damning clue. At 10:12 a.m. on April 9, the morning she went to meet Sun Zian with the altered data she exported the faulty technical proposal as a PDF using her own account and sent it via the company email to Mingkang's purchasing department. The body of the email read, "This is the latest version, fully verified and correct." I took screenshots of the original email, the PDF export record, and the email timestamp, packaged them all and sent them to lawyer Chin, adding a line. She used her own account on the company computer after I had left to modify the files. Then she blamed me, saying the data I left behind was problematic. "Is this enough?" Lawyer Chin replied with just 2 words. "Enough." But I didn't strike back immediately because I knew that since Bai Ruolin dared to send that blame-shifting email, someone must have been backing her, and that person's next move definitely hadn't played out yet, so I waited. On the 4th day of waiting, the next move came at 3 o'clock that afternoon. My phone was suddenly bombarded with messages. First, attorney Chin called. Ruekang Legal just sent an official letter to Hung Tai demanding that you pay liquidated damages for breach of contract. Then came a screenshot of an email from Hung Tai's legal department. Ruekang accused me of abusing data access privileges on the eve of my resignation, claiming that on the evening of April 6, I used a super admin account to download over 40 gigabytes of core data from the corporate cloud drive, seriously violating a confidentiality agreement, and demanded 3 million yuan in damages. I stared at that letter for a long time. And then I did one thing. I opened the browsing history from that night at 9:13 p.m. on April 6. I did download a batch of data from Ruekang's corporate cloud, but it was my personal RAND records, raw patent data, and all the project documents I had independently completed over 6 years that had never been included in my performance reviews. And here's the key point: at that time my super admin privileges had not yet been revoked, within the validity period of my permissions using my legitimate identity and a compliant port to download lawful personal data posed no legal issue whatsoever. What's truly interesting is that the data loss time listed in the accusation letter was April 6, but Rowland modified the files on April 8. If the data I left behind had truly been problematic, she would have seen the issue directly, rather than adjusting the parameters first and then presenting the newly altered files to the client. This was a counterattack to clear my name, but it wasn't enough. I had to completely cut off her retreat. I had Attorney Chin send a formal reply to Ruekang Legal. All files downloaded by Ms. Su Yue are personal RAND results and patent supporting materials, and do not constitute Ruekang's trade secrets. For the convenience of review, we have provided your company with full details of the download logs and welcome a line-by-line verification. Furthermore, your former employee Rowland twice modified core algorithm parameters on her own on April 8 and April 11 and once admitted it in front of the board of directors. There is a meeting recording as evidence. The original operation logs and before and after comparisons are hereby submitted. Please provide a written explanation within 5 working days. Otherwise, we will report the false technical report to the Drug Regulatory Authority and Ruekang shall bear all consequences. The implication is your product might be completely shut down. Within 2 hours after lawyer Chin hit send, the legal director of Ruekang called her back. The tone was no longer the usual matter-of-fact official attitude. Instead, there was an awkward, almost conciliatory note. Lawyer Chin, could we possibly discuss this matter behind closed doors first? Lawyer Chin didn't hang up on him, but she didn't agree either. She only said, our Ms. Su's position is very clear. Whoever initiated the attack must be the one to end it. That evening, Song Ji finally sent a second internal email to Rowland, but this time without using the word recommendation. The email read in black and white: effective immediately, Rowland is transferred out of the product department, will no longer be involved in any technical lines, will cooperate with the company's internal review and awaits further action. The email was copied to all mid-level managers and the HR department. When Rowland received it, she was still at her desk revising her blame-shifting report. Xiao Ju from Randy Team 6 later told me, her face turned pale after reading it. She tore her report in half and stormed over to Mr. Song's office, but the door was locked. This time, no one went to open the door for Rowland. Song Ji's way out had been cut off by the product data. Her way out had been cut off by the very blame-shifting email she herself had sent, and I sat in Hung Tai's office, watching the newly blooming cherry blossoms outside the window and sent Tang Jianchen a message. The first battle is over, let me show you something funny. Tang Jianchen replied, what joke, I said. Someone who wanted to take credit shifted the blame to save herself and ended up shifting herself right out of the game. After sending the message, I placed my phone back on the desk and began preparing the next phase of technical documents. The patent issue was not yet resolved, nor was the licensing matter. Ruekang had only temporarily backed off from Rowland. As long as the patent infringement issue remained unresolved, the troubles ahead were unavoidable. What I was waiting for was the day they would truly come to me for a solution. The day news spread that Rowland had been transferred out of the product department, Ruekang's stock price dropped by 2 percentage points. Not because she was that important. Who did she think she was? The capital market didn't even know her. The drop was because Minkang Hospital had posted an update on its official procurement announcement board. The Smart Infusion Pump project has entered into a direct licensing agreement with patent holder Su Yue. Subsequent procurement will not involve third-party licensing disputes. This was effectively a public statement. Ruekang, you're out. As soon as Minkang's announcement came out, the procurement departments of several hospitals in the industry that had been in cooperation talks with Ruekang were all on the phone. Their question was the same: does your company, Ruekang, actually hold a patent license from Su Yue? Song Ji had been on the phone for 3 days, and his expression grew worse by the day. He had the legal department redraft a long-term licensing agreement with terms set very high, an annual licensing fee of 2 million plus a share of sales, 40% above the market rate. He had the agreement forwarded to me via Vice President Wang, who passed it to Attorney Chin, who then gave it to me. I reviewed it. The terms were indeed more sincere than in any previous negotiation, but the final clause stated that Party A, Su Yue, could not sublicense the patent to any competing company, including but not limited to Hungtai Medical. I pushed the agreement back. Attorney Chin asked, "Would you like to make a counteroffer?" I said, "No need. If he doesn't remove this clause, I won't sign." Vice President Wang was frantic on the phone, sweating, and assured me he would relay the message, but Song Ji did not remove that clause. In his view, this clause was the most important part of the entire agreement, because if I couldn't grant Ruekang exclusive rights to the patent, then Hungtai would forever remain a threat hanging over him. He wasn't negotiating a partnership with me, he was using a high licensing fee to buy up the freedom of my technology. The stalemate dragged on for 3 days. On the evening of the 4th day, Bai Ruolin appeared downstairs at my Hungtai apartment. I noticed her as I was returning from picking out materials for the new house's renovation. She stood under the street lamp at the entrance of the neighborhood, wearing a black trench coat with her hair loose. She had lost a lot of weight and her cheekbones stood out much more than they had. Half a month ago, when she saw me getting out of the car, she quickly walked over but stopped 1 or 2 meters away, as if afraid of being seen with me. "Su Yue," her voice was strained. "You win. I have nothing now. My position was ruined by you, my project was taken by you, and Song Ji won't even answer my calls. I came today just to ask you one thing. When you left behind those files, did you already plan for me to walk right into the trap?" I looked at her. The street lamp stretched her shadow long and the hem of her trench coat swayed gently in the night breeze. "Let me ask you one thing," I said. "What's the problem? From start to finish, I never once targeted you. The seat you took wasn't an ordinary workstation, it was the position of head of product R&D. That position carries direct responsibility for machine safety and patients' lives. All you wanted from the beginning was this position, but can you take responsibility by signing off on the data in your hands? If not, you'll crash eventually. It won't be because of me, you'll crash sooner or later anyway." She bit her lip and stared at me for a long time, then suddenly said, "He's asked me to come to his office tomorrow. He wants me to sign a document. I don't know what it is." With that, she turned and left, her steps hurried and fragmented, as if walking on a carpet of broken glass. At 3 o'clock the next afternoon, I too had no choice but to set foot in Ruekang Tower again. This time, the invitation wasn't from Bai Ruolin or Deputy General Manager Wang. It was Song Ji who called me directly. He said on the phone, "Yue, let's settle this once and for all. The 3 of us, I'm begging you. Bai Ruolin will be there too." I agreed not to see him, but to see things through. At 3 o'clock sharp, I pushed open the door to the CEO's office. Song Ji sat behind his large desk, wearing a suit jacket but no tie, the top button of his shirt undone, with a light stubble on his chin. Bai Ruolin sat on the sofa, holding a brown paper document folder. When she saw me come in, her fingers fidgeted uncomfortably along the edge of the folder. Song Ji asked me to sit. I took the seat across from him, the same position as in the last negotiation. He spoke first, with a rare weariness in his voice. "Yue, today with Ruolin here, I'll make things clear. Back when I let you go, it was a misjudgment on my part. I thought the company could run without anyone, but in reality," he paused, "without your technical skills, Ruekang can't function at all. Ruolin sometimes went too far in the past. I'll deal with her." He pushed over a document, the new long-term licensing agreement. I noticed that the clause "shall not sub-license to competing companies" had been removed, but in its place was another. The patent license term shall be no less than 5 years, during which Party A shall not cooperate with any domestic enterprise other than Ruekang. By the time I finished reading that clause, Bai Ruolin suddenly stood up. She opened a craft paper envelope, pulled out a document and slammed it down in front of Song Ji. Printed at the top of the first page were 6 bold characters: "Internal investigation conclusions." Below were 3 core findings listed in detail: product data falsification, altering core technical parameters under the pretext of using Su Yue's legacy data, false promises to clients, misrepresenting the scope of authorization when making commercial commitments to customers, concealment of key evidence, maliciously deleting and altering data comparison records. When submitting explanations to the board, the document already bore the signatures of Deputy General Manager Wang and the legal director. Only Song Ji's signature and the company seal were needed for it to take effect. She demanded that Song Ji sign the investigation confirmation document immediately and stamp it on the spot. Sign it, Bai Wolin said, not looking at me, only at Song Ji. You said you'd handle my case, let's see how you handle it. Song Ji did not look at her, he looked at me. He suddenly walked around the desk to stand in front of me, his voice dropping low, as if forcing the words out from deep in his chest. Yue, what happened before was my fault. I'll handle Bai Wolin's matter once and for all. As long as you come back, I'll give you the technology, the product department. You'll have the final say on authorization agreements. You set the price. Can we start over? The office fell silent for about 10 seconds. I pulled out the document that had been inside my bag from the very beginning, the divorce agreement already signed by me, except now his name was on it too. I placed it on the desk, right next to the new authorization agreement he had just slid over. One was the end of him and me, the other was a rope he wanted to tie me up with again. I came today to bring things to a close. I looked at him, then at Bai Wolin, not to talk about starting over. I turned to Bai Wolin. Whether you sign that investigation conclusion you just mentioned is your call, but let me remind you, the version you wrote in the email to Ming Kang on April 9th doesn't match the timestamps in your algorithm modification logs. The IP address is the same machine. I've already submitted this, and your legal department has a backup. Blaming me won't work. Bai Wolin's face turned pale. The document bag in her hand slid onto the floor from the sofa, scattering a few pages on the carpet. I withdrew my gaze, picked up the divorce agreement, flipped the signed page to the top and tapped my finger beside his name. Song Ji, I didn't come here today to talk business with you. There is only one last step left between us. I'll ask you one question, and you answer truthfully. He looked at me. I asked, if I didn't have the patent and posed no threat to Ruekang at all, would you still be sitting in this room begging me? He didn't answer. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. That 3 seconds of silence had already written the answer all over his face. I stood up, folded the divorce agreement, put it into my bag and zipped it shut. Bai Wolin suddenly rushed in front of Song Ji and slapped the investigation conclusion documents against his chest. You're begging her for someone who's never coming back. You actually stoop so low in front of her. What about your promises to me? You said I'd be transferred to the administrative track after half a year in the product department. You said this position would make me secure, and now, your people at Ruekan can't even stand by their own words. How dare you guarantee my position with anything? Song Ji took a step back. He instinctively raised his hand and pushed her away, not very hard. But the motion was clear. Bai Wolin froze for a second after being pushed, and then she understood everything. She stepped back to the doorway, pointed at Song Ji and said to me, Suyue, take a good look. You did 6 years of technical work for this man, 6 years. These hands that pushed me today, did they ever push you back then? I said nothing. I just opened the door and walked out of the office. The hallway was very quiet. In the final week of April on a Thursday, the weather was fine. Hung Tai Medical's press conference was held at the newly opened Hyatt by the river. The second-floor banquet hall featured an entire glass wall facing the river mouth, with sunlight spreading across the water, filling the hall with flowing golden light. The venue was impressively arranged. Hung Tai's branding department had been building anticipation among industry media a week in advance. The title on the invitation was restrained, just 7 characters, a new frontier in technology setting sail anew, but word had already spread faster than the invitations. The news that Ruekang's former product director had joined Hung Tai with 3 core patents was buzzing through the industry. By 9:30 a.m., the banquet hall was full. 3 rows of media seats were lined with cameras and long lenses. The front rows held industry guests and investor representatives, while behind them sat procurement heads from several major hospitals. Ming Kang's general manager Sun was also there, seated in the second row by the aisle. He nodded at me as I entered. Ruekang's people came too. Song Ji sat in the last row in the corner, next to Deputy General Manager Wang, whose face was as stiff as iron. Bai Wolin had no seat. She stood behind the side door of the banquet hall, phone raised, camera aimed at the stage. She had no authority to attend the conference, but she couldn't bear to miss it, perhaps to covertly record something, or perhaps just to see me standing on the opposing side stage. I was wearing a navy blue suit with an ivory silk blouse, my hair pinned up, makeup light. Tang Jienshan sat to my left, with Hung Tai's CEO Zhu Mingyuan beside him. The keynote visual on the large screen was a line of white text on a blue background. Trusted infusion safety, a complete closed loop from patent to product. The hall's lights slowly dimmed. Leaving only a warm white spotlight on the stage, Ju Mingyuan spoke first, briefly outlining Hung Tai's strategy and commitment in the field of smart medical devices. Then Tang Jinshan introduced the RAN-D team structure. He did not mention Ruekang once, instead focusing solely on the statement that continuously bringing in top industry talent is Hung Tai's consistent strategy. A murmur arose from the audience. Some said Director Tang's words sounded nice, but everyone knew he was referring to Su Yue. When the microphone reached me, I stood up and walked to the podium. The camera flashes began going off frequently. Without rushing to speak, I inserted the USB drive into the computer and clicked open the first slide. On the screen appeared a bolded headline: Public Disclosure of 3 Patent Technology Descriptions and Licensing Scope. I said, "Thank you everyone. Today I have 2 announcements to make. First, I am officially joining Hung Tai as Chief RAN-D Scientist, taking full responsibility for the development and iterative upgrades of the Smart 4 pump product line." Applause broke out from the audience. Several industry veterans in the front row nodded and applauded, while the Hung Tai team stood up collectively and clapped for an extended period. I paused and turned to the second slide. On the screen appeared a scanned copy of an authorization agreement. Patent holder Su Yue and Hung Tai Medical Group had formally signed a contract. 3 core patents were permanently licensed to Hung Tai Medical Group, covering all current production models and all iterative products over the next 3 years. The second matter, I looked up at the audience. As of today, the 3 infusion pump-related patents under my name are permanently licensed to Hung Tai Medical Group. The banquet hall fell silent for less than a second. Then the sound of camera shutters exploded all at once. A reporter in the front row raised a hand and asked, "Engineer Su, does this mean that Ruekang Medical will lose the right to use these 3 patents?" I looked at her, my tone very calm. "Ruekang currently has no long-term licensing agreement with me. The document they obtained earlier was a one-time temporary permit covering only Minkang's order of 300 units, valid for 30 days. Apart from that, there is no second authorization." There was an uproar in the audience. People in the back rows whispered to each other, their voices like ripples of a rising tide. Sun Zian, the head of Minkang's procurement department, stood up and took the microphone handed to him by a staff member. "I am Sun Zian from Minkang Procurement. I'm not here today to support Hung Tai, I'm here to support Su herself. I've known Su for 6 years, and in all the technical work she has handled, there has never been a single safety incident. Minkang's next order of 1,200 infusion pumps is now officially transferred to Hung Tai." Another hospital representative stood up, the head of the equipment department, from the Central Municipal Hospital. "We always thought the infusion pump was Ruekang's product patent. Now we know it's personally held by Su. The Central Hospital's future procurement plans will evaluate supplier qualifications." The corner where Ruekang was sitting fell completely silent. Song Ji sat there, gripping his knees with both hands, his knuckles white, his head was slightly lowered, and he didn't make eye contact with anyone. Deputy General Manager Wang fidgeted beside him, constantly wiping the sweat off his forehead with a tissue. Behind the curtain, Bai Ruolin still held up her phone, but her entire posture had stiffened like a sheet of paper. The reporters didn't let them off the hook. The first female reporter to rush up to Song Ji thrust her microphone toward him. "Mr. Song, after losing the core patent license, how will Ruekang's existing product lines respond, and how will the competitive landscape with Hung Tai change?" Song Ji stood up and smoothed the hem of his suit jacket. His voice was as rough as sandpaper. "Ruekang will handle its own problems, thank you." With that, he lowered his head and walked toward the side door. Deputy General Manager Wang chased after him, and Bai Ruolin, who had been standing behind the curtain, instinctively put away her phone and followed. But just as they reached the side exit, 2 security guards stopped Bai Ruolin. They checked her press conference credentials, which she had temporarily borrowed from the marketing department, found that the information did not match her identity on the spot, and directly escorted her out of the venue. Song Ji did not look back at her. He walked quickly, and as he passed through the beam of light at the doorway, the slumped shape of his suit's shoulders was clearly visible. I stood at the press conference holding the scientist appointment letter that Hung Tai had given me, watching the 3 of them being removed from the board one by one, like 3 chess pieces. At that moment, I felt no satisfaction, only a sharp sense of certainty. All these years, I had never truly stood at the center of the stage. But today I did. After the press conference ended, I walked out of the banquet hall. Hung Thai colleagues crowded around me, heading for a group photo in the corridor. A few reporters kept chasing after me with questions. I answered a few briefly as I walked, the exchange flowing smoothly. But what I didn't notice was that someone had been waiting for a long time by the elevator entrance at Zone C of the underground garage. He stood next to the row of silver fire hydrants, still wearing the same suit from the press conference, jacket unbuttoned. There were deep dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me come out, he stepped forward, blocking my car door. "You think you've won?" His voice was so low. It was almost drowned out by the hum of the garage ventilation ducts. "As long as Ruekang swallows Hung Lai, you'll still be mine." I didn't look at him. I opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat. In the end, he shoved aside the person beside him, even if that person was by Wolin, but he never learned to shove aside his own pride. As the car window rolled up, his shadow stretched into a splatter of scattered ink under the light. 3 days after the press conference, Ruekang formally initiated the acquisition process for Hung Lai. Song Ji mobilized every resource at his disposal, his mother Lin Xiuji, with 2 family shareholders, to increase capital and introduce a capital firm north of the Yangtze River as a joint actor. Ruekang launched a hostile takeover bid for Hung Thai Medical at a 23% premium per share. The news flooded financial media with increasingly sensational headlines. Ruekang's counterstrike, acquiring Hung Thai to break the patent deadlock. At 9 in the morning, Ju Mingyuan, CEO of Hung Thai, convened an emergency board meeting. Tang Genshin and I waited outside the conference room for the result. He leaned against the wall, spinning a pen with no ink. Very fast. I sat on a bench, reading the latest message from Attorney Chin. It contained just one sentence. "This time, they're not bluffing, they've actually poured in a lot of money," I replied. "Then let them pour it in." 2 hours later, the board meeting ended. Ju Mingyuan walked out looking all right, but the crease between his brows had deepened into a pronounced frown. He handed Tang Genshin a copy of the resolution. Hung Thai's board decided not to accept the hostile takeover, but required dual countermeasures, both legal and technical, to secure arbitration support. That was Ju Mingyuan's message to Tang Genshin and me. "Hung Thai will not sell, but we need to win this battle in the arbitration tribunal. In that battle, technical evidence is the ammunition." That was precisely the ammunition I had been waiting for. That same afternoon, Attorney Chin initiated legal proceedings. Instead of following the conventional route, she directly submitted a technology barrier blockage application to the Municipal Commercial Arbitration Commission. The core argument of the application was clear. Ruekang's true purpose in acquiring Hung Thai was to circumvent patent law through capital means, forcibly obtaining authorization from the patent holder, thereby constituting unfair competition. Attachment 1 is an internal email retrieved by Attorney Chin from Ruekang's legal department mail server. The sender is the director of Ruekang's investment department, the recipient is Song Ji, and the date is just 2 days before the acquisition offer was issued. The body of the email is blunt. After acquiring Hung Thai, the perpetual licensing agreement between Su Yue and Hung Thai will transfer with the entity, and the patent usage rights will return to our control. This is the most economical way to resolve the patent issue. Attachment 2 is the operation log showing by Wolin modifying the core algorithm on April 8. The email screenshot of the false technical solution sent to Mingkang on April 9, and the full audio recording of her admitting to the modification during the board meeting. These prove that Ruekang's data falsification occurred after my resignation, has nothing to do with me, and was known to Ruekang's senior management. Attachment 3 consists of 6 years of RAND records I kept item by item since joining the company. Every page of the lab log includes a date and an independent witness signature, and the earliest timestamp is a full 8 months before I ever set foot in Ruekang. Taken together, these records form an unimpeachable chain of evidence. My patent is independent, Ruekang's infringement was willful, and the sole purpose of acquiring Hung Thai was to bypass the law and use capital to exert pressure. The arbitration hearing is scheduled for Wednesday at the East District Commercial Arbitration Center. The weather was beautiful that day, sunlight bleaching the cement of the parking lot downstairs. The air conditioning in the arbitration tribunal was running high, and everyone instinctively pulled their jackets tighter upon entering. 5 people showed up from Ruekang. Song Ji sat next to his counsel, Impeccably dressed in a suit, but the dark circles under his eyes couldn't be concealed even by foundation. Lin Xiaoji did not attend, but she made her stance clear outside. The board is willing to add another 20 million to the litigation budget. When Song Ji saw me before entering, his gaze paused for a moment, then turned away. It wasn't anger or grievance, but a kind of discomposure he didn't want me to see. The hearing began. Ruekang's counsel spoke first, their core arguments circling back to just 2 points. First, that the patent should be considered a work-for-hire invention. Second, that the acquisition was a normal market transaction without malicious intent. As he spoke, his voice remained steady, but the substance was thin, like a beautifully wrapped piece of candy that kept getting smaller. When it was Attorney Chin's turn to speak, she stood up, split the evidence package into 4 sets of indices, and handed them to the 3 arbitrators and the clerk. She explained page by page, with no emotional appeals, only a complete and coherent legal logic. When she came to the argument about willful circumvention, she played the audio clip. "So what if I modified it?" By Wolin's voice rang out in the arbitration tribunal, sharp and clear. Ruekang's attorney requested an immediate pause in the presentation, but the chief arbitrator overruled the motion. Song Ji, upon hearing his former secretary's voice, closed his eyes for a second. During the mid-hearing break, Ruekang sent Deputy General Manager Wang to intercept me in the hallway. He said the arbitration commission might not issue a ruling until mid-next month, and asked if I would sign a permanent license to Ruekang before the ruling came out, saying this would count as our side making a voluntary concession, beneficial to both you and the company. I looked at him and said, "Deputy Wang, you don't need to persuade me. Under your acquisition terms, all Hungtai employees get reassigned, and my patents go to Ruekang. Do you think I don't know that?" Deputy Wang's face reddened again, and he turned and walked away. After 3 hours of investigation and debate, the arbitration tribunal announced its ruling in court. The acquisition offer proposed by Ruekang Medical Technology Group demonstrated a clear intent to circumvent patent law and normal licensing procedures, constituting unfair competition. In accordance with relevant regulations, the review of Ruekang's acquisition of Hungtai is suspended. Ruekang must submit counter-evidence showing no infringing intent within 15 working days, otherwise the acquisition will be formally revoked and the company will face a regulatory anti-unfair competition investigation by market supervision authorities. What does this outcome mean? It means that not only will Ruekang fail in its acquisition, but the premium it has already paid out in its capital deployment cannot be recovered, and in the end, it will also come under the scrutiny of regulators. The hearing ended, and Song Ji pushed open the door to walk out of the arbitration center. The sunlight hit his forehead and he squinted slightly before spotting me waiting by the car at the bottom of the steps. He took a few steps toward me and said, "Yue, wait, I want to say something to you." The bodyguard didn't stop him. Attorney Chin glanced at me, and I nodded to let him come over. He stood beside me, lowering his head for a moment before lifting it again. "I'll give you whatever you want, come back." I looked at this 31-year-old man standing under the sun, a thin layer of sweat beading on his forehead. His posture was no longer the confident, triumphant stance he had when he signed his first big deal all those years ago, but I knew there was still one core qualifier he hadn't said out loud. After "come back," what would always follow was "and keep helping me." "Song Ji," I said as I pulled open the car door, "every time you say come back, there's an unspoken condition attached. 6 years ago, it was come back and help me with the tech. 3 days ago, it was come back and sign the authorization. Today, it's come back and save the company. I'm not coming back." I closed the car door and looked out through the window. His shadow stood on the steps, split in two by the sunlight, one half bright against the marble pillar of the arbitration center, the other half fragmented into a blur on the ground. In the rearview mirror, that shadow grew smaller and smaller. In June, Hungtai Medical acquired a new plot of land in the southern part of the city, specifically for building an R&D center for intelligent medical devices. The groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled for June 12th. Below, a temporary white ceremonial tent was set up. Upstairs on the 21st floor was the unfinished new office area with protective film still on the window frames. I changed to a new ID badge, blue background with white text, Chief Scientist, 3rd Research Institute, Hungtai Medical Group. A new intern on the team had just reported for work, and someone asked me in a low voice, "Professor Su, Could I join your infusion pump project? I said yes, but first study 3 months' worth of experimental records before joining. The young girl nodded nervously, making a few veteran employees chuckle. Tang Genshin sent me a WeChat message. I opened it to find a photo of coffee captioned, "Your workstation has been empty for 3 days." I tapped twice on the screen and sent a smiley face in reply. At 1:00 p.m. the ceremony began. Zhu Mingyuan had me stand in the center for the ribbon cutting. 6 people held the scissors in total. To my right was Zhu Mingyuan, to my left was Tang Genshin, and further left was President Sun from Mingkang. He had deliberately worn a maroon traditional Chinese tang suit, looking especially festive amid the sea of dark suits. About 20 or 30 media outlets showed up. The flashes were so intense that Zhu Mingyuan joked, "Stop taking pictures or we'll burn out the light bulbs." The moment the scissors came down, I looked up at the red banner on the archway above. Hungtai Medical Intelligent R&D Center ribbon cutting and new project launch ceremony. The wind puffed the banner outward, then let it fall again like a person letting out a long sigh after the ribbon cutting ceremony. Reporters crowded around for interviews. After Zhu Mingyuan and General Manager Sun each said a few words, the microphone naturally passed to me. Just then a commotion arose at the edge of the crowd. The reporters turned their heads first, then let out a soft, surprised "her." Like ripples spreading across water after a stone is thrown in. It was Deputy General Manager Wang. He walked through the crowd with 3 core engineers from Ruekang's product R&D center holding a document in his hand. In front of the media cameras, he stepped up to me and handed over the document with both hands. "Engineer Su." He cleared his throat, his voice still a bit tense, but his tone was more serious than ever before when speaking to me. "We are from Ruekang's product division, but we're not here representing Ruekang. The 4 of us would like to apply to join the 3rd R&D Institute of Hungtai. This is our jointly signed transfer application." A nearby reporter gasped. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Aren't those the veterans from R&D, Xiao Ju?" Standing behind Deputy General Manager Wang, secretly gave me a cool gesture with his thumb. I took the application, flipped through it, looked up at Deputy General Manager Wang and said, "Ruekang's product department has lost the 4 of you. Can the rest still hold up?" "We can't hold up anymore," Deputy General Manager Wang said. He said it flatly, without dramatics or seeking credit. "But Hungtai can hold up, Su. We've followed you for 6 years. We respect your skills and we respect your character. You built this department after you left. We sat at the same workstations, but every day we were writing someone else's proposals. We don't want to write them anymore." He took the pen from his chest pocket and placed it on the first page of the application. In the silence of the entire room, I signed it. Deputy General Manager Wang put away the now effective document, turned to the equally silent press corps and said, "If Ruekang doesn't change itself, no one can save it. The step I take today is to stay true to my original conscience as a researcher and developer." There was a small incident in the onlooking crowd. A ceremony attendant suddenly ran over and whispered something to Zhu Mingyuan. Zhu Mingyuan turned to look at me and lowered his voice. A woman at the entrance tried to cause trouble, but security stopped her. I turned to look outside the ceremony tent. Bai Wolin was being held back by 2 security guards at the edge of a flower bed several dozen meters away when I walked out after the ceremony ended. She was still standing there. She wasn't wearing any makeup, had on a wrinkled beige shirt, and her hair was tied up in a messy ponytail with an elastic band. She looked even thinner than the last time I saw her at Ruekang's office. She rushed at me as soon as she saw me, but the security guards blocked her way. "Su Yue," she gritted her teeth, her eyes bloodshot. "You ruined me." I stopped and looked at her. Her phone screen was cracked, there was a bandage on the web of her thumb and her fingers were clutching that old long-dead phone, the knuckles turning white. "He dumped you, didn't he?" I asked. Bai Wolin's lips trembled. She stared into my eyes, then suddenly, as if something had pierced her, her voice shifted from sharp to hoarse. "He's put all the blame on me, saying I hid the fact that I altered the data, saying I cheated the company. Now he tells everyone that I'm the one who ruined Ruekang. So, you came today hoping I would speak up for you." She didn't answer. Instead she shoved her broken phone into my hands like someone presenting a piece of evidence no one cared about. I said, "You come to me for fairness, so tell me this. Back when you posted on Moments from my desk and said to me at the elevator, 'Just you wait,' did you think about fairness then?" "I was just trying to survive." She nearly shouted. Yes, but the way you chose was to step on others to climb up. Back when you sat down in my office, you were going after my job. Now you expect me to plead your case. Bye. Wolin didn't yell again. The hand gripping her phone slowly lowered, and her voice dropped so low it was as if she were talking to herself. He said, Wolin has 6 months left. Back then I really thought I was his only choice. I watched her without speaking. The security guards took her away. I turned and walked back to the ceremony tent. Lawyer Chin pushed through the crowd and held up her phone screen to me. The Municipal Arbitration Commission had formally ruled to completely reject Ruekang's acquisition of Hungtai. At the same time, the Municipal Intellectual Property Office and the Drug Administration issued joint notices, launching a patent infringement investigation and a product quality and safety review of Ruekang's 3 core product lines. Twin investigations, Lawyer Chin said. For Ruekang to survive, it's going to cost them a pound of flesh. I took her phone, glanced at the document number, and handed it back. At 5 in the afternoon, I was the only one left in the temporary office area of Hungtai's 3rd Randi Institute. I was tidying up the new employee files on my desk when the corridor lights came on section by section. The cleaning lady pushed her cart past the doorway and said, Professor Su, still here? I said, leaving now. The phone lit up at that moment, a text from an unknown number. I opened it. There were only 2 lines. Su Yue, I didn't know about the child before the meeting that day. I didn't have time to see what was written on that form. It was Song Ji. I looked at the message but didn't reply. I set the phone down on the table, pulled open the drawer, and found a folded piece of paper, a photocopy of that pregnancy test report. It was a bit worn now, and on the back of the fold, several faint fingerprints had been left behind from when it was crumpled into a ball at the all-staff meeting. I refolded it and fed it into the shredder. The shredder started, its serrated teeth biting into the paper's edge. 3 seconds later, that thin sheet of paper had lost its last trace of form. The security guard Old Jong told me something later. He said that on the evening of the ceremony, a man stood outside the new Hungtai building for a long time. He was wearing a grey suit, holding a piece of paper that fluttered noisily in the evening breeze, never daring to come up. The guard went over to ask if he needed to find someone. The man shook his head and turned away. Old Jong said he noticed the man's eyes were a little red, but he wasn't sure if it was just the streetlight playing tricks. I did not verify the matter. On June 18, the Hungtai Smart Infusion Pump 4.0 project was officially launched. I led the new team through the first technical review meeting, filled 23 pages of my notebook, went home in the evening, cooked a bowl of noodles, and continued revising the drawings after eating. Life shows no sign of stopping, and I have no intention of letting it stop either. For some, I have already finished writing their stories. For others, their journey is still long, but for me, mine has just begun.